Welcome to the Bible Forum. It's Sunday night. It's the second Sunday in August. I think it's the 9th. I can't remember for sure. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. I hope that you are in a comfortable place, lounging about, as it were. If you do not get one of our emails each week, it's not my fault. You want to sign up to receive the weekly rundown of topics, just shoot me an email at thebibleforum@gmail.com. I'll put you on the list. It's a one-sheet PDF. I don't send anything else. It'll give you some idea of what's going on. Some people like it. You never know. We have a world in turmoil. I don't know if you realize this or not. But I came up with what I consider to be the #1 news item this week. It hasn't gotten a lot of press. It will. It should. It's the explosion in Lebanon. The official position here is that Hezbollah was stockpiling ammonium nitrate in a warehouse near a dock. The picture shows a 4 or 5 or more story building with only about a third of it still standing. Hezbollah, literally the party of God, a Shia Islamic political party and militant group based in Lebanon, are the ones accepting responsibility for this. Ammonium nitrate's a fertilizer, but also an ingredient in the development of explosives. The number of killed, we're being told, is in the hundreds. But early in the week, not from our news agencies, but overseas agencies, the number was anywhere between 1 and 4,000 people. Now, the vast majority of them were missing. And it's possible that the couple hundred people they're talking about is all that really were found dead. But a large part of that building just vaporized. Major General Amos Yadlin, he's a reserve officer now, executive director of the Institute for National Security Studies, said that it started from a small explosion at what looks like a fireworks storage facility. And then the big explosion came. 2,700 tons of reported ammonium nitrate stored at this warehouse by the dock just ignited, blew up. Ammonium nitrate is an agricultural product, but it's also a favorite Hezbollah way to develop explosives. And that material has been there largely since 2014. Clearly, this was not agricultural. Yadlin pointed out that Israel hasn't attacked Lebanon in 14 years and that the two countries have no real dispute over borders. Even a disagreement over offshore gas drilling rights in the Mediterranean Sea, he says, quote, was already brokered by the Americans. Hezbollah, on the other hand, is looking for excuses to keep the conflict going. The issue started with Iran sending advanced weapons to Hezbollah by way of Syria. So far, Iran has failed operationally to deter Israel, and Syria is focused on what remains of its civil war in Idlib. The theory here is that Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah decided to step up and attempt to revenge any Israeli activities in Syria, even if Hezbollah terrorists would be killed as well. And this is what some analysts claim happened last week. Their assumption is that Nasrallah attempted to calibrate his actions so that they would, on the one hand, kill a few Israeli soldiers, but on the other, avoid an all-out war. And according to Yadlin, very much like his Iranian masters, he failed operationally. Now, in the aftermath of the Beirut explosion, Nasrallah has found his excuse to, quote, remove this issue from the agenda, especially if this warehouse was a Hezbollah warehouse, he said. And there are already a lot of voices in Lebanon that blame Hezbollah for their financial difficulties. So where does all this leave us? Well, that's pretty much anybody's guess. But Iran, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and a bunch of lesser nations are on record as saying that they will not stop until Israel is gone. In other news this week, Hamas fired a rocket into southern Israel. Israel's Iron Dome defense mechanism knocked it down before it could do any damage. However, early on Monday, Israel returned by launching warplanes in a counterattack against Hamas, hitting several sites in central and southern Gaza. They hit a cement factory that supplies construction material for underground infrastructure, as well as underground facilities used by the Hamas terror group. Israeli warplanes also hit several Hamas sites in central and southern Gaza Strip. This, according to Israel Defense Forces, hours after Palestinians fired a rocket into Israel from the coastal enclave. The Iron Dome missile defense system intercepted the rocket as well. Over in Turkey, as early as August of 2019, Turkey has been refusing to allow Christians leaving the country to return. As Christian foreigners leave the country at airports, officials stamp an N28 code in their passports, according to the IPCF. Officially, the code indicates that they need to obtain special approval to re-enter the country via their country's embassy. But those who have tried to obtain such special approval have learned that it is routinely refused, making the code essentially a de facto ban. Do you know what it is that keeps you alive? I don't mean the physiological side of being alive, but being alive in the interaction with people and your own self, for that matter. In a special TED Talk seminar, an unidentified woman, I was sent merely a clip of one part of what she said. It does not explain who she is or what's going on. But she is explaining what keeps people alive. She listed 10 items, starting at the bottom, working up to the number one issue. That issue is social integration. Apparently, if we don't have a productive, inclusive, active relationship with people, we will not live as long as those who do, assuming all things else are equal. The other 9 items were things like clean air. That was at the bottom of the list. And in working your way up came hypertension prescriptions, staying lean as opposed to being overweight, exercise, cardiac rehab, flu vaccines, quit boozing, quit smoking, and close relationships are important. So how much do you actually interact with people? Not online, people you speak with, face to face for the most part. Not just those people you're close to, but maybe the person who makes your coffee at Starbucks, the postman, the postwoman. Today they're in trucks. It's a little harder. The woman who walks her dog near your home. Do you belong to clubs? Do you meet with people on a regular basis? In all of this, I noted that she didn't mention church. But the fact that number one is social interaction is significant. God created human beings to be interactive. Think family. Human beings have always banded together in groups, villages, cities, nations. And the result has not always been great. But that's because of the human heart. We're a selfish bunch. We want what we want, and we want it now. Today, those who can, and think about it generally, want to escape to a less populated area. The top of some lonely mountain has an appeal for a number of people. The privacy of a special room in the house, the quietness of your own heartbeat. But that's not the way God created us. We're social creatures. It's probably because of our sin nature, expressed in ungodly and or inappropriate ways, that cries out for the extreme extended solitudes. But what value do you have if you're not interacting with others? Sharing the gospel, illustrating the patterns in life, challenging the status quo. We would be but one lonely soul, isolated, closed off, muted. We'd have our internet, we'd have our cell phones, so we could still communicate, we could still learn stuff, but we'd be sacrificing the most important communication, our presence. In that circumstance, would we really be alive? Would we be participating? Would we have influence? Would we be confronting sin? Would there be a collective influence if everyone were isolated from one another? We call our collective influence church. Worldview Weekend is running a series by Manning Johnson, former high-ranking black communist. Manning has been dead for a while. Have you tuned in to worldviewweekend.com? They're on every weekend. But Manning Johnson warns Americans about what he calls the Black Reds. The Black Reds that were under the control of Moscow and were used to stop the advancement of black Americans back in the mid-20th century. Manning Rudolph Johnson, also known as Manning Johnson or Manning R. Johnson, lived during the first half of the 20th century. He was born in 1908. He died in 1959. He was a Communist Party USA African American leader, and he was the party's candidate for U.S. representative from New York's 22nd Congressional District during a special election in 1935. He later left the party and became a government informant and witness. He said in 1958, "Beneath all the racial unrest in this country is the clammy, cold, bloody hand of communism." He wrote about it in a book. The book is entitled Color, Communism, and Common Sense. Some of the chapters are Subverting Negro Churches, The Red Plot to Use Negroes, The Real Uncle Toms, and Creating Hate. He names the group, the New Weather Underground, as being communist, and believes that Black Lives Matter is just the Weather Underground, under a new name. He names students for a democratic society as members of this organization, people like Mark Rudd and Bernardine Dorn. Dorn went on to marry Bill Ayers. Dorn and Ayers became close personal friends of Barack and Michelle Obama. Barack Obama was tutored by Frank Marshall Davis, an avowed communist. Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn launched Obama's political career. One of the videos talks about the concerted effort by Marxists to keep black Americans from advancing. Businessmen wanting to build black housing were stopped by Black Reds. A group of black Americans wanted to build a hospital in New York City to serve that community. They were stopped by the Black Reds. And there's a whole lot more. Go online, worldviewweekend.com. After they do it, they'll probably run it as separate items. It's worth your effort. When we come back, we're going to talk about gold. Have you got any gold? Gold's gotten very interesting lately. Stay tuned.